Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you are watching on YouTube, you can find out more about how to become part of Office Hours at officehours.global. We start the first hour with questions, any questions that you have, media or virtual production. And then in the second hour, we spend a little more time on something. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about how to get better at office hours. There's so many things that we're doing. So if you're new, I realized probably got to back up and just say these are all the things that you could be doing, and we're going to brainstorm a little bit. So we've got a lot of our panelists here today. So I'm going to talk a little bit right at the very beginning about how I look at it, and then they're going to talk about how they look at it, and then we're going to open it up to questions and try to get through as much as we can in an hour. Tomorrow we're going to talk a little bit more about being a producer, the things you have to think about when you're producing an event. That was a very popular request. And then on Saturday we have the second hour is education. It's always a great conversation that we don't put on YouTube because we speak pretty frankly about education. So that's off the air. And then in after hours, we will have the Belfast method at noon. So that's coming up as well. So stay tuned for all of those things for the rest of the week. And without further ado, we're going to move forward. Bill, what questions do we have?
We have a good group of questions today, starting with Johnny Estias in Manila in the Philippines. And Johnny asks, my Monoprice 8x8 HDMI has worked with any device I connected at 1080p 60, except for a Mac Mini or a Beelink via embedded HDMIs. I get an about 1 hertz flashing image. A workaround is to use pluggable adapters instead. Can anyone explain why this is happening?
Go ahead, Jason.
I can't explain why it's happening because Monoprice is, well, not exactly the most accessible and verbose when it comes to their technical documentation. I would try Underscan just to play with that and see if that makes any difference. I would also just try using anything other than the native Mac Mini HDMI output.
Now, I will say that I finally get to return the favor that Johnny Estias got me to finally get my 8x8 working. So I have exactly what you have, and I've got some Mac Minis connected to them, and I just need to say that they work perfectly. So I think that I don't know what resolution they're set to, but I'll take a look at it. But that's how I interact with all those Mac Minis and the PC, and I haven't had any issues. They do take a little bit of time to come up every once in a while, like the very first, as it's negotiating. But I mean, like when I say like a little time, like 2 seconds instead of instantly. So that's the only, and I'm not sure whether that's the monitor or the 8x8, but the 8x8 has been working for me. I have found recently that I've had some issues with HDMI cables. And specifically Monoprice HDMI cables. So that may not be the place that I'm going to keep buying them. But their Monoprice 8x8 seems to be working just fine. All right, next question.
Kyle Holiday in Dallas, Texas is up next. He says, thoughts on the Elgato low-profile mic arm?
Go ahead, Jason.
My thought is that for the money, you're much better off with the Heil mount. It's not low profile, but it's extremely compact and it's really great at staying out of the way.
Yeah, go ahead, David.
But if you are looking for something that's low profile, I don't see how you can go wrong with this. I ordered mine. There is no update on shipping dates because they're back ordered. Hopefully we'll get mine in October. But for the price, if it's solid.
Sorry, I got them wrong. Ken?
Yeah, I have both the Heil and the Elgato low profile. And as a low profile arm, it supports the weight of the Heil PL40 perfectly. And I am super impressed. The price for it, for the full metal construction that it is, I can see why they're very difficult to get hold of. I'm really impressed with the quality of this arm.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I agree with Ken. I think the low profile, lower type booms work better, at least for me, because it gets it up out of here and above here, because so many times I have a boom behind me. There's so many times I'm banging it with something. But having the low profile device, this isn't an Elgato, but it's like it, makes a lot of sense. And it's a lot cheaper than the MicMe variant.
And Rupert?
I just wanted to clarify the terminology in the low profile sense of the Elgato product. It's essentially meaning underslung in that scenario, much like the OC White. So the Elgato Wave is the regular one. The Elgato Wave low profile is what we sometimes refer to as underslung also.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So I don't have the Elgato, but I do have the Vivo, which is actually cheaper than the Elgato. And if you're looking for a cheap underslung arm, this is probably going to be the better. I wouldn't even be surprised if this was actually the arm that they're using and they're just rebranding it as Elgato.
Okay, next question.
Next question, we're moving to Andy Carluccio in Washington, D.C., and he's asking, without getting political, what's the broader impact of the possible IATSE strike on the industry, seeing as new media negotiations are a sticking point? What does this say about the landscape of the virtual production industry?
Go ahead, Sky.
Well, we did see the writer's strike of 2008, and it was the proliferation of documentary style, or a producing from capturing a lot of media, was really exploded at that point. So it wasn't 08, when was but the writer strike had a big effect. So anytime you have a core segment of your industry not show up, there's a hole in your process.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
It's a correction for the way things are being done. Our brothers in IATSE deserve the same considerations for streaming media that the actors in SAG just got. So I think they're sitting there saying, wait a minute, we have something deserving here. We've got longer hours and we need to be compensated. As to the effect, I've seen a huge rush of production coming through, at least the union jobs that come through right now, because they don't know what the outcome is going to be. It might get settled prior to the actual strike, so we can only hope.
Go ahead, Bill.
Really quickly, I've been surprised and kind of impressed with a number of associated unions, not necessarily under the IATSE banner, but who have banded together. So I think this is going to be a pretty serious confluence of producers versus unionization, and it's going to be really interesting to see how it comes out. I have no clue what's going to happen, but I do think it's going to be a serious fight here.
Regardless of what I think shouldn't happen, it'll accelerate virtual events. So completely virtual events, it'll depress hybrid events and in-person events, and it'll push towards, and it'll continue to accelerate a push towards not putting anybody on the ground. So it's probably, I can't tell you whether that's good or bad for anyone, but I can't tell you that's what's going to happen. So, because people won't be able to do their events and they'll do them online, so that's how that'll probably shake out. Next question.
Richard Lavery in Belfast, UK. Are there any drawbacks to routing your program feed into a Smart VideoHub and then into an encoder rather than directly into the encoder?
I'll go with Jason.
Well, with the exception of a one more point of failure, I would say none whatsoever.
Yeah, go ahead, Noah.
Same answer as Jason, and I want to add that with adding that Smart Hub, you actually have the ability, if your switcher fails, which I've had switchers fail in the past, you could route something else in there. But the reliability of the Smart Hub versus the switchers is what comes in question. I think the Smart Hub is pretty reliable, though.
Yeah, I mean, you're again, to exactly what Noah said, and Jason, it is the extra thing that could go wrong that you want to look at. We do that, but we have actual physical pins that we could bypass the video router if for some reason something went wrong. That said, we've almost never had a video router go bad. We've had individual inputs on the video router, be erratic, because they got yanked on or something like that. But the actual thing going down has never happened, knock on wood. But the once they're up. So anyway, but you do have to consider that you're putting something else in. Generally, we recommend it. We recommend putting a router. Almost everything that we do goes in and out of the router. We don't ever connect the switcher generally directly to the encoder because we want to be able to reroute that as necessary. Next question.
Nathan GS in Singapore is in next with my ATEM Mini Extreme does not automatically connect to the Playoutbee every time I restart the systems. Both on static IPs, I get them to work again by going into the ATEM setup menu and connecting again. Any ideas as to why this is happening?
Go ahead, Jason.
My guess is that the Playoutbee does not have some sort of hard-coded resolution, and I think if you were to go into the Raspberry Pi setup, and hard coded resolution and a frame rate, that might help.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next, and he says the Mini ATEM Extreme ISO only offers 2 outputs despite having 9 inputs. How many mix effect buses would you consider the unit to have?
Go ahead, Jason.
Unless I'm wrong on the terminology, I would say that DVE, or digital video effects bus, is a superset of ME. So I would say 4 or 6, depending upon how you're counting it. But if you need direct outs, the answer is 2.
I guess I would say 1.5. You know, there's one bus that you can actually cut against, and then you're mixing things into it either upstream or downstream. So oftentimes when we have those kind of separate buses that are doing the graphics processing, we would consider that kind of a half, you know, because another ME would be, I can add to one of those windows, I can have a whole nother switch going on. You know, it's a set of, you know, the actual bus. So I would say 1.5, but it could be looked at in different ways. Next question.
Ari Block is back from Tel Aviv, Israel, saying it appears that streaming to Facebook, YouTube, and RTMP is not available on Zoom events. How does this impact the attractiveness of Zoom events as a platform?
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I would say that if you're doing this a lot, you should probably just scrape the screen and push it in 1080, especially to Facebook. I use vMix, so that with vMix's API, you can push it in 1080. So it's not that big a deal to those of us that do it that way, because we never use the 720 anyway. But for other people, this pure simpleness of it it's going to be a pain. So, but screen scraping is a way around it for now. They'll probably fix it with enough complaints.
Go ahead, David.
Yeah, the people from the events team have actually addressed this on Zoom Test Kitchen, and you know, because Zoom Events is meant to be really a registration platform for events, they imagine that the people that you want to see this event will be in Zoom Events. They do stream it to the Zoom Events homepage, as it were, to your events homepage rather, but yeah, they're not building in YouTube or Facebook quite yet.
Go ahead, Rotem.
Yeah, so I wanted to say what David said, and like from my perspective, if I will do a Zoom event, I want everybody to be on the platform because I want their email, their contact, their whatever. I want them to be on the platform and not watching it outside. If I will want them to watch outside, I will use other Zoom products.
Go ahead, Rupert.
It's interesting because on the plan comparison on their website, it says that Zoom Events contains all the features of Webinar plus all these other things. So it's just kind of interesting how they've laid those features out.
Ari?
Yeah, so my initial reaction is what? But then I thought, okay, perhaps there are some cases in a paid event. Yes, you want everyone in the same container. There are models, however, where you do want to offload either capacity or for other reasons, such as, for example, viewing tickets being free and a VIP ticket on the platform, something like that. I just thought it was strange. If they fix it, that would be great. I would much rather have the ability to enable it, you know, turn it off, than being restricted in that way.
Yeah, I think sometimes when companies do that, they want to generate a certain behavior. Like they want to have people try to use it, because a lot of people will use it the way they used to use it. So they'll go, okay, I just can stream out to something. And they want people to try to use it the way that they envisioned it, at least a little bit. So I think that that's probably part of the calculation there. Next question.
James Brooks in New York City, or New York at least, comes up again with, is the Belfast project on Saturday accessible on the office hours link or the after hours link? Thanks.
In the past, what we've done is we put it in a separate link altogether. So we'll publish that tomorrow, and I forgot that I had to put that in there. So it has its own link. That way they can have their own meeting as it goes through. I believe that's how we've done it in the past, right? Or did we just do it with after hours? Did we do the last one in after hours?
Yeah, it was complicated.
No, they do have their own link. I'll get a copy of it and put it on the link on the website, because it's the same one.
Yeah, let me verify it to make sure it still works in Zoom. But yeah, absolutely. Okay. Sorry, we'll have that sorted. I guess the correct answer is we'll have that sorted out, and it'll go out in the morning email tomorrow. So thanks. Next question.
Regular questioner Douglas Carmichael is back again with, many broadcasters use 3D graphics as a common way to explain complex concepts. How do you model and animate in 3D quickly?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Cinema 4D round tripped into After Effects. And if I'm in a real hurry, I'll stay inside After Effects and use Element 3D from the great Virtual Copilot.
Go ahead, Stuart.
We can list lots and lots of software as variations to what's been given, which is probably the easy ones to start with. But the truth is, when it comes to broadcasts, the reason it happens so quickly is because they have a team of artists who do this day in, day out. Just like if you were to sit and look over, say, Sky or Chris Fenwick's shoulder at editing and you knew nothing about editing, it would be like watching magic. I used EDIUS for something like 17 years. And seeing somebody who is an expert at it, I couldn't follow what they were doing because of how fast and how much. People who do 3D are exactly the same. They get very good at being very efficient at their chosen application.
Go ahead, Sky.
Yeah, Alex, I really do bow to you because you are kind of at the forefront of that. The traditional tools that I've used are, as mentioned, Cinema 4D. And there's also the free version of this concept called Blender, which is actually being used in all of the major industries. It's an open source from as far as I'm aware. But the word 3D and quickly should not be in the same sentence.
Well, you can be.
Data sets.
What I will say.
Talk about data sets, please.
What I will say is that it's going to get a lot easier pretty quickly here. So we're about to run into a 3D revolution that is going to be pretty exciting, where it's going to be a lot easier to animate 3D objects. And here's what I think is going to happen. Number one is you're already seeing the way to do this quickly. The way I do it quickly. TurboSquid. So if the first place I look is TurboSquid, and I think Shutterstock also has a 3D service. These are places that I just go buy models. I don't like. I just built a living room with a bunch of speakers and a bunch of other things. I didn't model any of that. I went up there and I paid $39 for the speakers, and I paid $15 for the TV, and I paid $25 or whatever for the couch. Like that was, and I didn't need to figure out how to model. That would have taken me a week to model those well. Instead, I just paid a small amount of money, like stock photography. So I will, and I think iStock actually now does this. So remember that you can just get stock models. As far as broadcast graphics, the leader by far is Cinema 4D. Now there's Maya is in the visual effects world is probably the leader in that area as far as how people use those things. But so the Autodesk tools are one side on the visual effects, but when it comes to broadcast, Cinema 4D is kind of cornered that market as far as what they do there. Blender is still something that a lot of people use, but mostly because they don't have the money to pay for Cinema 4D. so it is a pretty full-featured application. The thing that's coming up that's really interesting, though, if you're on the Mac platform, is Motion. Motion now does it. I've been building projects inside of Motion as a test, and I've been, it's not perfect. It doesn't give me all the tools that I have, but if you correctly pre-build your models or tweak them in Cinema or even in Blender, you can output them and bring them into Motion with their textures and lighting and everything else, and then animate them in real time and render them out of Cinema. Now there are some limitations. There's not global illumination, and there's certain types of objects that will alias a little bit. So it's not a perfect thing, but for education and for a lot of other things like that, it's pretty slick, as far as how it works. And so the exciting part of that is that's just the beginning. What we're going to see is the ability to take these USDZ. That's the format that is about to become the standard. It's not just Apple's standard. They've let it be. It's from Pixar USD, and there's USD-A and USD-C or USD, and then there's the USD Z, which is just basically a USD binary that is zipped. so the big advantage there is that eventually we're going to see it go into the more widely used apps, I believe. Apple is supporting this. Like, you can literally take a message in Apple Messages. You can text someone a USDZ file and it'll pop up on their desk. And so because of that, now not a lot of people are using that yet, but when it ends up in Pages and Keynote, or if it does, then there'll be a huge gold rush of people rebuilding models, because none of the models that are out there right now are going to be, they're all going to be obsolete, to that format, to that platform, which is, 100 times larger than the current market for 3D.
Well, I saw that application being advertised on television, that they have their product. It's a table, and they will say, take your camera into your living room and put our table virtually. And so it's begun.
And that's coming very quickly. And so there's a huge, because of that, there's going to be a new, much more portable way to move 3D models around, but that's also going to affect us. So for instance, one of the things to know is that like in motion, you can build, like, let's say an engine, you can have an engine that explodes out and has, you know, that'll just roll out. Now you can save that out as a Final Cut generator and literally open it in Final Cut and have a slider. You just publish the slider and so the editor, all they have to do is move the slider and the whole thing just opens up and closes up. So the editor gets to creatively decide how fast they want it to open or close, but they don't have to know how to animate, you know? And so there's a lot of those tools that are already built into the tools that are out there right now. We're still in the very early stages of what that looks like. But it's going to be very exciting. So it's going to get a lot faster, but it is difficult at the moment. Next question.
Noah Sargent's up next from Fullerton, California, and he says, I try to set aside 10 to 30% of profit from a project toward new gear. Do you have any gear purchasing rules?
Go ahead, Rotem.
So I have a 10% buying gear rule, but with one exception. If I need something like mission critical, I will buy it. So I had an event, I did testing, my PC is like blue screen every 20 minutes. 2 hours after, I got a new Mac Mini on my table. Don't care about nothing.
Right. Go ahead, Bill.
It's just changed so much since I started, because most capital expenditures were really, really big. I mean, you wanted to go out and buy a new camera, you were talking about anywhere from $30,000 to $100,000. The fact that you can now get capable cameras for the cost of what I used to spend on a 4 or 5 day shoot for craft services is just insane. So all of these things I think have to change. It is still incredibly smart if you're in business, and particularly if you're new in it and you're building your business, to put a real serious chunk of money aside for the improvement of equipment. But over the course of the time, you don't have to do that consistently, and your business will go through phases where you're acquiring new equipment, or you've got tools that you're comfortable with and that will last for a while. Then you just have to look at depreciation over time, and all these things are important.
Go ahead, Ari.
I was going to say apply the buy once, cry once rule, but I seem to be crying a lot lately, but I digress. That's more of the buying one multiple times. No, I tend to work more on a horizon and stay ahead of the game. So on a 6 to 12 month scale, I anticipate what technologies I'm going to be using and purchase accordingly so that I can tool up and be there when the time arises.
Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, I follow the rule I got from Alex in terms of charge the clients the use of my equipment as if they was hiring it out, so slightly less than that. And that way you can very quickly build up a revenue pot to buy new gear.
Josh.
There is an exception to that rule. I would apply things that are fast-moving price vectors like memory storage and storage drives. You don't want to buy those ahead of time, because by the time you need them, they'll be cheaper and faster.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of times what I have to admit, we don't invest that much in the distance. What we look at is basically what do we need, and our budget, to what Ken outlined, is our budget to buy things for a specific show is a little less than what the rental of all the equipment was. So we could spend up to that on new gear. And that's kind of a conscious effort we don't do that all the time. There's some shows that we don't need to spend any of that, and that goes back into, overhead. So, but a lot of times we're buying a couple new pieces of gear, and this is just basically like what Josh was talking about. We don't buy anything until we absolutely need it. Then we buy that, but it sits inside of that budget, and we just buy as we need. And for Pixel Corp, what would happen is a lot of times we had collisions. I've got 4 kits somewhere in the world, and I need 4 more hyperdecks, and that's how you end up with 35 hyperdecks. So anyway, you buy them because you got into a pinch, but they set inside of that rental thing. You do have to get to a point where I had, which is there's a new overhead called storage. At its height, Pixel Corp had a 10,000 square foot warehouse that was full of gear. So then there's the added $10,000 a month that it costs just to hold the storage and hold the gear. So you have to kind of think through that as well. Next question.
Next question comes from Paskin in Miami, Florida, here on the panel, and he says, is there a way to schedule a Zoom to start without a host actively pressing the start button?
Go ahead, Josh.
So without the host actively pressing the start button, you can schedule the privilege of an alternative host. They can start the meeting for you. If you need that host to schedule a meeting, you can give them that privilege in the settings. And if you need them to do other things like start polls, you can offer those settings. That's a way of doing it without you personally having to press the button, if that's what you're after.
Go ahead, Rupert.
Yeah, Josh is right. That's one way to do it. But that alternative user does need to be a user on your Zoom account. So you can't nominate somebody on a different account. It has to be a user in your account. And I believe they have to be a licensed user on your account. You can also schedule a meeting to be able to start without a host. I think it's called join before host, which means the host doesn't need to join. The participants can join, but there'll be no host functions in the meeting until a host or an alternative host joins.
Go ahead, Sky.
I think I must have misread the question. I was thinking, because I work as a part of a team on a Sunday morning, I'm the one that's pushing that go live button versus the person that's in front of the camera. So I must have misread so part of a team, schedule it into your run of show, and it's practice was what I was going to say.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, with a Zoom room, you can pull it off. There is a calendar where you can say automatically start scheduled meetings. So you would just flip that on for the room and it says automatically start scheduled meetings according to the room calendar. And an alert will appear 10 minutes prior to the scheduled time to let people know. And then you can also set it to stop as well.
David?
So I'll admit that I don't really know why they want to do this, but the question was asked, hands-free, right? No one having to press a button. And I suggested the join before host, and they know about the Zoom rooms. I also suggested possibly using IFTTT, but I wasn't sure if there was anything else.
Yeah, I do believe through the API you can activate a Zoom room as well. That's how you spawn. I think you can spawn lots of rooms. So there is ways to do it, from code as well. Next question.
Laura Thompson here in the panel from Texas is up next with what is the difference between an SDK and an API?
Go ahead, John.
Laura, that's a good question. I will start it and Jason can conclude. API, so SDK is a software development kit. They give you all the assets necessary to develop your own application separately from the API. API is application programming interface, and it allows external code to access a platform like the Zoom API. And so running an application that you run from your own application that ties into like the Zoom database, and then I can access scheduling and users, et cetera, et cetera.
Go ahead, Jason.
Oh boy. Okay. So the real difference, I'm going to try to make this more succinct. The real difference is that an API is really just an interface for a service. It's pre-compiled and it's ready to go as long as you know how to use it and what it needs. An SDK is a whole kit and caboodle of stuff: sample code, graphics, examples, a README, and all of these things that have been created for the purpose of using the program. So conceptually, both are a way for your program interface and for you to program the interface and control the resources of the software.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
And you can add an API into an SDK, but you cannot add an SDK into an API.
Next question.
James Brooks in New York is up next. Started experimenting with zoomISO to an ATEM Extreme using the displaylink pluggable. What is the best way to get all of the Zoom audio into the ATEM? Thanks.
Go ahead, Guy.
I'd say just adding another machine, another HDMI input would be the best way. So it's pure digital audio. So unfortunately, there's no audio with zoomISO. So you're just I would grab gallery view or pick active speaker as your fifth input or whatever you're doing on your ATEM Extreme.
Next question.
Nathan GS in Singapore says, does the Shure MV7 using the USB out introduce more noise than the XLR out?
I actually don't know the answer to that, and I will guess that it's going to be the USB is going to be quieter than the in general throughout the entire chain than the XLR. Go ahead, Bill.
I suspect Alex is right about that, but there is one circumstance where it might not be, and that is if you take the USB and extend it in any form, you're not using a balanced connector as you are with XLR, so you will not
well, it's digital. It's digital, though. It's digital once it goes in. You'll have an issue if the USB breaks up, but it's a digital signal going over the USB. So it'll be that's the advantage of using the USB. I'm going to guess that it's going to be quieter only because it's converted to a digital signal at the mic as opposed to going through, any kind of analog chain. Because remember, you have to now go through, when you go use the XLR, you're going through the preamp of some other device to get into the computer. So there's, I don't know whether they're both the same on the way out of the mic, but through the entire chain to what you're doing, most likely you're going to have more noise in the XLR. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael. Would there be any residential FTTH providers that have ultra low latency, 10 to 15 milliseconds?
I'm not clear what FTTH is, or how you're defining that.
That would be fiber to the home.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Verizon, Google, sometimes AT&T. So those are the three that I know of that are doing fiber to the home right now. Next question.
Yeah, Douglas Carmichael's up next. I've expressed interest to Richard in taking on audio responsibilities for Saturday's Belfast show. Without an external control surface, could I comfortably sound check and mix with the X32 Edit and a mouse?
Oh yeah, you should be able to. I mean, comfortably is a big word. The reason that you want a physical interface is so that you can grab a bunch of faders and move them up and down. Can you comfortably do it? I don't know. Can you do it? Yes. Depending on the protocols and how the accidental theater has it set up, you should be able to control it with the software, but you won't have the fine control that you would have with an analog interface. Next question.
Noah Sargent in Fullerton, California. First hour, Alex has talked about HDR 8K 120 frames per second being the future. I believe Thunderbolt 4 is limited to 8K 30 hertz. Will we need Thunderbolt 5 before we see HDR 8K 120 frames per second?
Go ahead, Jason.
Well, the short answer is no. DisplayPort, Thunderbolt 4 also added DisplayPort Alt Mode 2.0. It also added USB 4, which supports DisplayPort 2.0. That will allow 8K at 60 with HDR10. It will also support 16K 30 at HDR10 because it sends all of the data in one direction to the monitor and use all 8 DisplayPort lanes at once.
Yeah, when I say it's the future, it's also sometimes my version of the future and other people's version of the future are different. It's 3 to 5 years away, so it's still there's still a progression, but you're going to start seeing content at 8K 120. That's been happening for the last 3 to 4 years. So there's like a decade of time of when we think about something or have the very first test. So NHK has really pushed the forefront of that process. So NHK and by NHK's impact, Sony and Canon and a couple other folks in Japan have really pushed it. And the Japanese Olympics was the Olympics in Japan. It's not their Olympics, but that really helped push that forward. And there were a lot of private screenings of that, and they were showing it at NAB for years. And what I will say is that the visceral impact of that resolution and frame rate is so intense that I feel like it is going to arrive. It's just a matter of, there's a lot of things that sound crazy. I remember when X8 SD cards or whatever were shown, and they're like 256, gigs on a single card. It seemed like it was absolutely insane. Like that would never actually happen. That breaks the laws of physics. Now we do it all the time. So I think that 8K is probably something that is going to make its way forward. And actually, it's probably a huge problem for broadcast because they'll never get there. Broadcast as we know it will never get there. It'll all be OTT. So that becomes a real problem for traditional terrestrial broadcast. Next question.
Johnny Estias in Manila, Philippines is back with just finished helping a local Manila tech org with a virtual event. Due to last minute changes, I had to create a few more super sources. Mix Effect saved my rear end. Are there any of you using Mix Effect for your events?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Johnny, first of all, great job on the coding of that program with ATEM. I think it's magical how well it works, and it works well on iPad, and it works well on my M1 Mac. As far as a live event goes, I think when you guys get it baked into Companion, it will be even more useful. But as it even is now, it truly is an rear saver.
Yeah. we're using it in Office Hours 2.0. That's how we're building up our super sources. So they're automated, and it's we're talking to Mix Effect Pro, which is then talking to the ATEM. So so these are, we're already using it, and we've already used it in a lot of live events. Our pipeline isn't. We've had some issues with the Stream Deck in a live environment, so with Companion specifically of double keying or not keying. So as a result, Stream Deck is not particularly part of our pipeline for live events at ONO. We use it for comms and we use it for other things. We don't use it as much for that. And so, but we definitely use the iPad and have it, tied into that, and it's been very successful and for us. And we've done things that. I think that both what John's working on here to record and what Adam's working on, those two initiatives are pushing, add so much value to what Blackmagic does. Like, it's incredible. Both those initiatives have really just changed the way we look at our hardware. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next, and he says, how would you create a lower Fenwick for those with complex audio chains? For example, those that use audio networking like Dante or SoundGrid in the studio.
Go ahead, Ken.
I use Keynote. You can create an unbelievably complex as you want, lower third or audio chain, as I'm kind of demonstrating here. So yeah, Keynote. You can, with that, you can draw up and produce any kind of lower third.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, my OmniGraffle is still my go-to if I want to do complicated block diagrams that have things that can link together and they shift in groups. It's really functionally useful for that kind of thing.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeffrey.
Important to remember, if you don't need to really show it, just try and keep it as simple as possible. And if you absolutely do need to show it, and you're doing just a lower third, don't just put a ton of stuff and shrink everything in there. Like maybe make a third and then just kind of flip to another card which shows some more of it, or a slider or a ticker or something like that. But yeah, try and keep it as clean as possible.
And remember that if you make it yourself, it's a faux Fenwick. It's not a Fenwick. A Fenwick is only a Fenwick. An authentic Fenwick is only created by Chris Fenwick, and so if you make your own, it's a faux Fenwick. So just know, and the best way to have a Fenwick made is to send your chain to Chris, because Chris will just make one for you. Then you'll have, there'll be some day when people will say, oh, you can't get Fenwicks anymore because Chris stopped making them, or he just got tired of it, or he's too busy or whatever. And we'll look back on the fact that, you'll regret that you didn't ask Chris for an original Fenwick. That's all I'm saying. I'm saying, like, right now is an opportunity for us to get our original Fenwick. We've been trying to do NFTs of the Fenwicks, but
yeah, I was going to say, doesn't that sound like an NFT waiting to happen?
It turns out that the cost of the NFT, the whole thing is too high, because it makes it $100 just to give you the NFT.
We'll just make our own blockchain, and that'll fix it.
Well, yeah, exactly. So anyway, so that's the problem with it right now. But we do think that NFTs are in the future of Fenwicks if we can find a fractional way to do it. But I think that's it. So you can, but to get your original Fenwick, you need to talk to Chris about it. That's all. Next question.
Just don't give him your address, because you will get a bill. I'm just saying.
And it'll be in clips. All right, next question.
I see NFT consortiums coming.
Yeah.
Peter Moore, Auckland, New Zealand is up next, and he asks, does anyone in our Office Hours development community use the YouTube data API? And if so, thoughts, experiences, gotchas, and so forth.
Go ahead, John.
I've used the YouTube live data API, which has the same sort of gotcha, which is quotas and credits that you're allowed to ask. It's really terrible.
It's terrible.
So I use the live streaming data for live chat messages and H2R graphics. And I got so excited when I implemented it. And 1 hour later, I had used up all my credits. And you have to apply for more credits, which they will give you if you do all of the hoops and go through all the steps. But I asked for 10 times more credits. And what I realized now is I could only support like 10 customers with that. I would need to get millions of credits from it. So and I'm terrified that if I was to implement it properly the way they want me to, then I would need to be sure that I had millions of credits to cover the potential growth of an application. Instead, what I do now is get each user to get their own API key, which is a few hoops for them, but it saves me any trouble down the line.
Yeah, it's the quota thing. Especially because most of us, what we want is we want to get in. Now, there's other things in YouTube, the API that are actually useful. Like you can start up an event, you can populate all the issues with the event, all the terms, everything else, and just run the event and have it go. And that's cool. So that works well. But the primary thing a lot of us wanted to be able to do is interact with the comments, because the comments in YouTube are horrible, like the way they're displayed and processed and everything else. And so we want to take them out and make them useful. And the credit problem is it's like concrete on your feet, like in a deep lake, so you do the best you can. It is, we'll ask for different credits across, like we'll ask for these chunks of credits and be swapping things during an event, like a really complex event. We might have to swap them and move them around. And it's just a lot of somersaults to keep the event running. So it's really a pain. Next question.
Noah Sargent in Fullerton, California is up next. And Noah says, could you see a future using Oculus to video edit in 3D space?
Go ahead, Jason.
I certainly don't see why not. The real issue now is, unless, it is just kind of top echelon Hollywood grade shots, it's just so much easier to create a motion like a VFX shot and then composite what you need on top of it. That said, Alex had at one point 2 of these insanely cool cameras that would allow you to shoot, 360, and oh boy, would that be neat.
And one time I had 6. Not that I
6?
6 of them. Yeah, exactly. Go ahead, Josh.
That's kind of where I was thinking. I'm thinking if you're gonna edit 360 video, why not be in the video?
Yeah. Go ahead, Sky.
Well, coming from theater, originally that's what we were doing, was we were creating a thing in 3D or in actual space. To put a headset on, it's just a lot of, once you get all of the access to all of those materials, the lighting, the shading, the data sets that you're talking about, sure, why not?
Laying things out in 3D in VR is pretty cool, where you can walk around and move things and everything else. The big thing that you have to have is an app that can set up certain rules, like stick to the floor, so that you have floor planes. That turns out to be a really big deal. Like, if you throw a table out on something, you want it to stick to the floor as you move it around, because otherwise it's not going to. Yeah, otherwise you keep on moving into a place that it can't go, and it looks right to you, but then it's like 6 feet off the ground. And so those are the kind of things. So 3D editing is really useful in that area. What a lot of us have is you can very quickly play it out to your to Oculus. So you can do that now, in most of the apps. And so you kind of edit it. You get used to looking at it in the hemisphere, into a Mercator projection. So you get used to what that means. And I have to admit, I don't know if I'd want to have my goggles on for a day straight. So I kind of prefer to sit there and think I know how it's working. And again, you translate it pretty quickly when you start working with this, but you'll see a Mercator projection of what you're doing, and you'll know what that means. Okay, this person's walking on this side, and you'll know that, like, when they're on either side here, they're on either side of your head, and where they are, and you get used to that. And then you are constantly checking it. Okay, put the goggles on and look around. Okay, I got that. And then you take them off and you work some more. I do think, to your point, that you may want to do that eventually, but the resolution's a little low, and it's, right now. And it's hard on your eyes. I mean, it's, the most I've spent in a VR goggles is about 2.5 hours. And when I got out, I was kind of like, okay, and so I don't know if the feeling that I had with my eyes when I took the VR goggles off after 2.5 hours, was like, I don't think I want to do that again. And so, and that might be just our technology getting better. But that was not a killer experience for me, to do. So I think that'd be hard to edit if I have to do it 8 hours a day.
So I've got a question, Alex. How do you storyboard in 3D? How do you storyboard with a normal storyboard in 3D, or do you? You mean in 360 or yes.
3D? Yeah.
Sorry.
We build really long ones. So we think in. When you storyboard it, you actually think in that Mercator projection. Now, the way we storyboard them is we cut them really long and thin. So a standard Mercator is 2 wide and 1 high, and that includes the unwrap at the top and the bottom. We just clip that in a little bit and just talk about we don't talk about what's above and below you, because most people, we don't usually design for that very much. And if we do, we draw into it that, hey, we're doing something over top of your head, but we don't do that. In fact, most of what people are designing right now are 180s, because, we find that for most events, people don't look behind them. The real thing that will push that harder is when you really start designing for 360. I believe that there's a real market we did some experiments where you build something that's 5 minutes long, but it might take you might watch it over and over and over again because there's different things happening. So we built an event where there was like 4 different things happening throughout. So it's only a 3-minute clip, but you'd have to watch it over and over and over again to see all the storylines and tie all the stories back in. So the experience ended up being about a half an hour long, but the clip itself was only 3 minutes long, and it took you a little while. You kind of explored the space, and it wasn't like a choose your own adventure. It was that you got to look at what you were looking at, but to tie in everything that was happening and get the whole storyline, you had to actually observe it over and over and over again to kind of piece together, oh, that person was doing this while this person was doing that, and that person was doing this while and all of those things interacting was the thing that you were exploring inside of it, which is kind of rethinking that, getting away from the linear thought process into a non-linear stacked content process, which is, it hurts your head, just in case you're wondering, like you're trying to, how to storyboard and how to plan that becomes complicated. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael has a couple of questions here that are related to each other. The first one is, if I do purchase an Allen & Heath SQ Series, should I be concerned about the long-term lifespan of the fader motors? One advantage of the D-Live is the separation between the control surface and the mix engine. Thoughts?
Go ahead, Tim.
So I've got experience with the iLive, which is the predecessor to the D-Live, and I have a...
Oop, we lost him.
Oh, dear.
Froze. Oh, there he goes. All right, so we're going to... we use D-Live and iLive as well, and we had it for many years, and it never had any issues with the fader. It is nice that the mix engine and the control surface are separate, but that can be done in a couple different ways. So next question.
Oh, Tim just arrived.
Oh, Tim, are you back? Nope, we can't hear you.
My Zoom just quit unexpectedly. So
okay, go ahead.
I don't know what you heard before, but basically I have experience with the iLive, which is the predecessor of the D-Live, and the SQ7 is what I have now, also in active service. I've never seen a fader anomaly, and I imagine the motors on those are very similar.
Yeah. Next question.
Douglas is back again with the Allen & Heath SQ Series can only control channel level, pan, mute, scenes, and mix matrix assignment via MIDI, while the Allen & Heath Live can control more like EQ preamps, albeit being more expensive. For most automated workflow, would the SQ's control suffice?
Go ahead, Tim. Sorry.
I would just say yes. The control surface is very good. I don't know why you'd want to move everything over to MIDI or something like that.
Next question.
Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana is up next. He says, for iPads with lighting, what do people recommend for connecting a room mic and HDMI?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So I'm trying to figure out if he meant HDMI out or HDMI in. The reality is lightning cables run at a 2.0 speed. So being able to use more than one device to them is going to be pretty tough. And of course, the power issue is also going to be a big problem there. You could definitely run a mic into the iPad, but you can't do an HDMI in or bringing HDMI out. You could get one of those adapters that you could, one of these adapters where you have the HDMI and then the lightning that you could probably put to a USB, but you're probably going to take a ton of power to do that. So it probably wouldn't work too well.
Go ahead, Bill, real quick.
Yeah, Saramonic is my go-to for Lightning to XLR balanced audio connection. So there are a few ways to get things in and out.
Yep. Next question.
Comes from Stephen Fisher of Würzburg, Germany. And Stephen says, what could be the reason for a severe packet loss of 15 to 30% in Zoom, both audio and video? The client software on my Mac is up to date, 5.8, and the internet connection is via Ethernet.
Go ahead, Ken.
I would just check your internet connection, because depending on others who are on the line or whatever, that could be the problem. There's a website you'll go to called packetlosstest.com. Run that on your line, and that will tell you how much packet loss is actually on your line, which might be the issue.
Go ahead, Rodham.
So I had for a long time audio packet lost like crazy. I would lose, but only audio, not video, but I would lose the audio and everything else would run the same. I switched everything here in my office. New ubiquity, new cables, new everything's. Today, I went to my ISP, bought a new modem, and everything was fixed. So
Okay.
go the easy and then work your way up.
Yeah, one thing to do is also every once in a while, just restart your modem that goes to your ISP. Just unplug the whole thing, wait 10 seconds, let it cool down, and then plug it back in again. You'd be surprised at how many things it fixes. Like I do it about once a week. I just unplug it and walk away and go make my coffee and come back and it's all running again. And it, for some reason, it just needs a breath every once in a while. It gets updated with new things. Go ahead, Jason.
DOCSIS 3.1, I'll just go along the way of the modem. DOCSIS 3.1 standard is to have, if you look in your modem under each one of those channels, I believe it's decibels per millivolt, but the goal is to be between -10 and +10, at least in the United States. Yes, technically you're within spec, but if you are even a little bit off, that can make a huge difference. Also, look at your failed code words, because that'll indicate whether or not the modem is probably at fault.
Next question.
Josh Kaufman, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Good VPN versus bad VPN. When permitted, we always request clients disconnect from their corporate VPN to eliminate the Wi-Fi-like connection issues they often cause. What are the characteristics of a good VPN that will not degrade the client's experience?
Usually it's one that you're managing. There's rarely, if IT is managing it, they're closing so many ports to do what they're doing, and for valid reasons, that it's going to generally cause communication errors. A lot of things need feedback coming back, and they've closed off those ports. So any VPN, generally, unless you've worked with the IT department to really refine that, they often have packet shaping and so on and so forth to keep the network protected against too many people using YouTube, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of things there that they have in there to protect the corporate environment. So if unless you spend a lot of time working with it, it's not so much the VPN itself, it's how it's being administered is really where that comes in, and it has to be optimized for video and audio, not for safety. so that's usually the challenge there. Next question.
Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Foldable phones are now in their third generation. If this new form factor were to gain significant traction, then please speculate on its impact on media creation and consumption, i.e. pocketable tablets with larger screens and or different aspect ratios.
Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, I would suggest you actually sort of think about this a different way, that I don't think third generation makes any difference. I think what makes a difference in the absorption of a technology in the market is when there's a critical use or a different app or a use case that gets interesting. And this technology is clearly stuck in the first phase in innovators. And until somebody shows something other than, oh, look, I can have a keyboard on a different screen, it's not going to go anywhere. And I think that's why it could get to fourth or fifth generation before someone cracks the killer app for this platform.
I think when Apple releases it, it'll probably become the next new thing that and Apple will be like new and revolutionary, and Samsung will be like, what do we look like? So that's
but they'll have found an application that justifies the screen, which is what nobody's done yet.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So they'll package it better. So I think that's the challenge. I think I don't understand why I would need it yet, and I'm just terrified of bending a screen. Like it's just so far outside of my folding a screen just in my head just doesn't work. So I think that I just have to see it mature a lot longer. Go ahead, Ari, real quick.
Battleship.
Oh yeah,
the
Battleship
game
would be great. Yeah,
that is the killer application.
Go ahead, Josh, real quick.
I was wondering if the aspect ratio might be used. Like, for example, we've had social media with like Instagram doing more square aspect ratios. Would that affect media at all?
It could. It could. I mean, there's an awful lot of media created at 16:9, and then a lot by 9:16, and square is really frustrating. It's just a really frustrating format. Anyway, next question.
Tony Mobley in Noonan, Georgia. I have to do a year in review for the house of worship that I work with. Services are Sunday and Thursday. What is a way to go about it? Organizing video and editing the video itself.
Go ahead, Sky.
Well, as a minister Tony, you already have some skills. You understand a 3-point sermon, so you want to keep it succinct. What are your 3 points that you want to make in that time frame? Again, how long is a story? Well, it's the same question of how long is a piece of string. It's as long as it needs to be. You're working with your own audience, so they're going to want to see themselves, but they will still get bored of looking at the same face for over 5 seconds. It's just, you want to give that, you need to be ruthless in the sense of, if you're editing a story for a large group of people, it's think narrative. Maybe you want to do sequential, use the calendar as your backbone of this thing happened, and that thing happened, and that thing happened. So you're not doing anything we haven't done since humans were around a campfire. You're telling a story about a group of humans. Now, making those choices, I love your phraseology. I have to. No, you get to. So there's the opportunity that it's an attitude thing. And you're going to wake up at 2 a.m. and wonder, how did I get here? Because you've been there since 3 p.m. That's just what editing does. It's a magical time suck.
Yeah, good. Bill, real quick.
I was just going to say, this is the reason that they built a database into Final Cut. And it's the one thing about that particular NLE that I just couldn't live without. I've tried to expand out, but the ability to overlay multiple keywords onto scenes and make up your own so that you can put ranges of frames into any kind of organization you want and sift and sort them is just brilliant. It would cut a problem that is complex like that down to size really fast.
Go ahead, David.
I think, Tony, you're actually raising a really interesting question, and that is that smaller churches and synagogues and mosques need to start thinking about how they can repurpose their streams. They've all gotten really good at just kind of streaming out to YouTube and Facebook, but they haven't really capitalized on all of this amazing content that they now have for year in view, for social media posts, for things like that. So taking the time over the course of the year as you're doing this work to bear all of that in mind is going to be really key.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Nick Batt in the UK is up next, and he says, how would you manage footage in Resolve to move edited footage to a done folder without duplicating the footage to another location?
Go ahead, Stuart.
I would just copy it into a fresh bin. It doesn't make extra copies of it when you move it within the bins. I really don't see how it would duplicate it.
Yeah, and usually I want to duplicate it. So so for me, usually what I want to do is collect the file and put it somewhere so that later I can always open it. I want a version of it that is completely self-contained. Here's a folder that's in there, and if I open that up, it's going to refer to all the things that it needs. The danger that you have by having all of your projects refer back to data that's somewhere that's there. If you move that data, it really creates a cascading effect that isn't great. So when you archive, what you really want to do in a done folder is collect the files. And Resolve has a couple different ways of doing that. You can collect all the files that were connected to it, or you can have it trim them. And one of the nice things about Resolve is that it can actually trim the BRAWs and rewrite them in a way that you can't do otherwise. So you can say trim it plus or minus 20 frames, and it'll just grab everything that was in your edit and back all of that stuff up, but get rid of all the stuff you didn't use. Now, that may not be good if you want to do a re-edit, but if you want to go back and re-render it and just fix one little thing or whatever, it's nice to have a nice compact version. And oftentimes I make both. So I have a compact version that here's literally the compact version, and then I have the full version that's been collected. But I collect those things all the time. You can obviously just save the project file is connected to all that stuff, so you can put that in a done folder if you want. But I would not recommend it. Like when you finish something, I would recommend having even just a spinning drive or 2 spinning drives that you put primary and backup on, and collect everything and put them somewhere so that you can always get back to them. And in 6 months, you'll be relieved. Next question.
Chris Widener has our last one in this section. Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. What can we do for the areas with slow or no internet? Starlink isn't here yet. Is point-to-point wireless really a reliable enough backup?
Go ahead, John.
For the first part of your question, slow internet, no internet, that's speaking my language. For my use case, I have a 4G router, and then a couple of antennas on the roof, which are doubling, tripling, quadrupling sometimes the speed. For the second part of your question, I'm lucky that I work for myself and I run my own channel. And if my stream falls apart, I can live with that. But I'm not really ready yet to trust that on a paid gig just yet. My girlfriend comes home during a live stream, opens her laptop, does something, and I watch my stream sort of suffer the consequences for that. So it depends what you're doing. If you were just remoting into something, it'd be okay. But for primary or backup, maybe not just yet.
We've done pretty significant streams on point-to-points, and if you get a quality point-to-point like a Ubiquiti full duplex connection, the ones that we use are pretty big. That you can get little dishes, but you can also get much larger dishes that will give you more bandwidth and more reliability. We found that we can get about a gig out about 10 miles. With one a gig connection with the proper tuning. So what happens is that you sight them in. Usually we use GPS to get them kind of pointed to where they need to go. Then we sight them in, and then you turn on the transceiver, and it'll tell you what the strength of the signal. And you've got these little screws that you kind of turn, and you're turning it very, very, very slowly, and you're tuning your strength and frequency, strength between the two. And once you have them totally tuned in, you get a pretty solid signal. And it's really not as hard as it sounds. That you have plus or minus about 2 degrees, which seems not like very much, but it is at 10 miles. It's a big target. So there's definitely ways, and that point to point. The problem I had a point to point for a long time in my house, and the biggest problem I had was turkey vultures. They all sit on my. I have like a large number of turkey vultures live here, and about 8 of them live near my house, and they'll sit and open up their wings to get some sun. And they do it right in front of my dish. so at certain times of the day, I would just get these little weird drops, and I finally realized I ran outside. I was like, "What's going on?" And I realized it was a big turkey vulture with his arms open. So anyway, that's the only challenge is TVs. It's a different kind of TV. All right. Anyway, that's the challenge with wireless. Okay. Now we're going to change subjects. I thought that this would be an interesting one. I wasn't sure, but I feel like for a lot of folks that are getting started with office hours, it would be good to have at least a show where we talked about it, so that if you're like, I don't understand any of how this all works. I thought, and at the speed we're about to start going, we'll try to do this like once a quarter. So to just talk about, here are the new things that you could do, and here are the new things that you could do. But I think that for a lot of folks that are getting started, we should just have something that explains a little bit of how this works. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to list a couple of things that we do from my perspective. It'll take me like 5 minutes. And then what I want to do is, when I get to the end of that, if you're a panelist and you want to just add a couple things, go ahead and raise your hand, and then we'll go to the questions. So we'll try to get to the questions by 8:20, I think is what we're going to shoot for here. So this is how I look at it. And again, this is not the way everybody looks at it or how everybody is going to interact with it. But as the semi-co-architect of this thing, this is how I view what we're doing. So I look at it in layers, kind of like an onion, that you're going to get to this thing, and then you go open up this, and then you're going to open up this, and these are the other opportunities. Now you may take them in different orders than I give you, but this is how I think of how people kind of enter what we're doing. The first one, of course, is watching on the show. If you're watching right now on YouTube, that's the first step. And we're about to make it a lot more available. You can listen to it. You're going to be able to listen to it in a lot of different places in the next month. There's a lot of other things that are happening, but just listening. And one of the things that I know there's a question about this, and we'll talk about it more, but one of the reasons that we tighten this show up a little bit in office hours is just to make that listening experience a good listening experience, and we've offset that with after hours, which is that you can just chew on things for hours. Whereas this one is really trying to answer those questions relatively succinctly. There is for the panelists, we're also trying to create a muscle of being succinct, and saying what needs to be said, but also saying, there's that saying, I wrote you a long letter because I didn't have time to write you a short one. Well, we're trying to train ourselves to write short letters, and still communicate what needs to be communicated. Like, we will take time. There's some questions here we'll take 5 or 6 minutes or 7 or 8 minutes to answer. But a lot of times, especially when I say, hey, let's go quickly to a panelist, that means I think it was answered. Like, I'm being nice by jumping to you, but the question's been answered. So I'm trying to communicate to the panelists in a nice sort of way. Like, let's just get through this now. Because if you have something to add it, but add it in 10 seconds, just add that little bit. But, I think that we've closed this one off. So there's a danger that if we don't do that and we leave it wide open, that we can just drag on because everybody has an opinion, and you can end up with 8 or 9 people with their opinion. And for the listener, this is their first time that they've had it. They just kind of like, okay, well, I don't need to keep listening to this, and so we want to make sure that it's something that is kind of continually moving along, because we have to remember that probably in any given question, 60% of the people that are listening are not that interested in that question. So the thing is, we want to keep changing because it's different for every question. So you get everybody's interested in a 10-minute sample of office hours, but not everyone's interested in each question, and so we just have to, that's kind of the thought process that I have, related to that. So that's why I'm constantly trying to tighten that show and make it something. It also is, for me, one of the big things for office hours is as office hours grows, and we haven't worked that hard at growing it, but as it grows, it makes it easier for us to get all kinds of things. So we can have, we can make ourselves more, different people within this get more successful. The panelists are in front of more people, but it also means we have a higher level of guest. We have a higher, we can get to a point. I mean, I think that we could grow this to a point where we could get pretty much anybody to come hang out with us for an hour. And that's, that access is something that is very hard to get in a lot of places. But to do that, I need to be able to send them a show and say, hey, here's our show. Here's what we do. Now we're about to dress that up with the new Office Hours 2.0, but that is just, that's the facade. What makes it a great show is the panelists, and the tightness of the conversation and the rigor at which we hold ourselves to as we do that. So when people see it, they're like, oh, I want to be part of that, and so how we, a nice tight show that hits those questions, that answers questions well, is really powerful, and doesn't, meanders and is fun. You don't want to squeeze out all of it, but saying things in a way, in the, an efficient way is important. Anyway, so that's the first thing people do. They'll come in and listen to the show, and that's what we think about. And that show is oftentimes the first experience they're going to have of office hours. The second is to join Makana. So you'll hear us say, if you want to, you can click on the little link inside of Zoom. Now it's a little hard to join Mokana without being in. You do have to get into Zoom to get into Mokana. So that is we're going to make that a lot easier, because in Office Hours 2.0, you're only interacting with Mokana. Like there's not going to be any like Zoom version, and then I think you're just watching the stream, and the link that you get will be to Mokana. So that will be a little bit easier as far as how that works. And, the best thing to do there is to ask questions and vote on questions. Voting on questions is really important, more than most places, so it drives the whole show. Like what we talk about is what you vote up and down. And so it's not, we are a very responsive show as far as we'll just deal with those questions that you bring up. So bringing those questions in as a viewer is really, really important. It's going to take me a little longer than I expected, but I'll try to go faster. The thing is that what you want to be thinking about is every day put a place somewhere on your notes section, or somewhere you can put down, like when something pops into your head, that's when you want to write it down. I don't quite understand that, and then you just write it down. Just put it somewhere. You can be on a piece of paper, it doesn't matter. But the point is that you'll forget it by 7 o'clock in the morning, the next day, or you'll forget it. Not for me, I'll forget it 15 minutes after I thought it. So a lot of times I write stuff, that kind of stuff down, just because in the thick of the moment, it doesn't have to be something you're trying to fix either. It's just something you're going, I don't understand that around media or virtual production, or I'd like to know, I wonder what the panel thinks of that, and just write it down and then bring them in. If all of our viewers brought one question a week in, that's all it's all that's required. But if you brought a question in a day, or a question every couple days in, it really makes the show a different show. And the interesting thing about Office Hours is that it gets richer with more questions, with more panelists and more questions and more. It's a richer experience that we have, because it just keeps on. It's all these different people trying to figure out how to do what they're doing, and all of us learning from each other. So it's really, really valuable to ask those questions and discuss those questions. The next thing, of course, is and then discuss them. A chat function. Vote on the little trick. Vote on the question when the question pops up in the chat. You can actually vote on how good we answered it. That's not important yet, but it's going to become very important. So you want to get in the habit of telling us how that looks and how that worked. Joining Discord is the next thing that I would take a look at. We put out the Discord link at 6:48 in Mukana, so you have to be in Mukana to do that. But we put out that Discord. It's a whole world of discussion and people figuring stuff out and talking and everything else. There's 1,500, almost 1,500 people in there, and they're all talking about stuff and figuring things out. And that's a whole place that you want to be. My request is that we don't say this, we don't do the Discord announcement all the time, but think about first name space last name, and we will, if you don't have your real name, if you don't change your at least your name inside of our Discord to your real name, you'll get kicked out. So we really believe in real names there. My request is that you put a picture, and I would highly recommend a picture of yourself in there. That's like a regular picture of your face. It really makes it a much better experience. And then the secret handshake, kind of the extra sauce, is to put yourself over a white background. That's kind of because it'll show up everywhere in Discord. And what it allows us to do is see where we are. So if you see somebody else with a white background in another Discord, you know that it's kind of the secret handshake that we all know who we are, by using that background. Pixelcore used that for a long time, and you could literally see someone's like profile picture in a large corporation directory and know that Pixelcore member, because they would have those there, and then you could go over and talk to them. So it's a useful thing. Then, of course, after hours. So after hours is hidden at the bottom of the emails that you get every day if you've signed up to Zoom. At first, what I would do is just jump in and watch. Just listen to it. You don't have to. In fact, I would recommend it. We're like an old community that is in a digital space, in the sense that you should just watch a little while and get the flavor of how it works before you jump in to start doing so. If you've got a problem, go ahead and jump in and do it. But I would recommend a little bit of time of just seeing how the flow goes, and it has its own ways. You raise your digital hand if you want to say something, and there's a little bit of a process there that you want to take advantage of. But it is an incredible space. I leave it open like radio as often as I can. So pretty much any dead time I have now, I have office hours. I sneak in. I try to sneak in anyway, and just listen to the conversation, because it's really great, and most of the time it's quiet or great, but it's rarely messy, so I find it to be a great experience of being in after hours, in that area. And then, inside of there, find times you can answer questions. That's the big thing, is there's all these people here. You don't have to have your camera open all the time. You can just open it when you hear a question that you can answer. Don't try to, with all things, whether it's the panel or after hours, ask the questions and explore the questions that you have. Don't try to answer questions that you don't know. There's a lot of smart people here. So you're better off, you can say, I don't know, and this is my guess. Just be careful. Some people, you can have like a strong opinion about something, and you just want to answer questions openly. And there's areas that people are going to get right into the center of what you know and throw those answers out, and then explore with them and ask them about things and give theories and so on and so forth. Just be careful. A lot of us are the smartest. A lot of us in after hours, just who after hours and office hours attracts. Most of the people in after hours and office hours are the smartest person in the room most of the time. But here we're all just average. So with each other. So we just want to keep that in mind. I would definitely look at ways to contribute in after hours of just answering questions when it comes up and something you can answer. Then after that, join projects. There's projects that are just cropping up. People are trying to figure this out. They're trying to figure that out. The best way to get to know people is to work with them, and so figure out ways that you can jump and you can help and you can contribute. You never know where it's going to go, where they're going to go, where the people next to you that are working with you are going to go, and who they're going to need next, and whether you're going to need help from them somewhere in the future. And it's just a great way to learn, because we've created this crazy thing where it's okay to fail. It's okay for things not to work perfectly, in these projects. And so you can experiment in places that we can't do at work. So it's pretty, again, I would watch it at first, like the Belfast method. That's, there's the Belfast method, the Mobley process, and the Kahio concept, and the remotes, and there's all these things that are kind of constantly rolling up, and people are figuring stuff out. I truly feel like we're now getting to a maturity where we're about to start moving the whole industry forward, with what we're doing. And so this is an opportunity to get in when it was just getting started and just getting figured out, and try to figure that out. And there's going to be a lot more opportunities soon. With Office Hours 2.0, we're going to be putting out calls for people to work on different pieces of it. And the goal there is to have a whole bunch of people that know how to do it so that we can keep on doing that. After that, I would say joining the panel. Don't be in a rush to join the panel. You can't, but definitely think about it. I will admit here's the secret to the panel is that I'm a horrible introvert. I cannot walk into a room and say hi to anybody. Like I only go to parties that I know people at. And I'll glop onto them until someone else comes and talks to me. I'm like, I am not good at this at all. I've never been good at it. I cannot break the ice. And so what I learned to do was my coping mechanism is that I could speak in front of people. Like for some reason I can do that, but I can't talk to them directly and break the ice. So speaking was the easiest way for me to meet people. So the panel is kind of built around that, is that the easiest way for you to meet other people and to, find other people that might hire you, find other people that you can hire, find people that you can partner with, find people that, and then just learn, is being on the panel. The panel generates those, you become, all the other things that I just listed are things that, you'll be part of the community and you'll keep on building, you'll keep on learning and getting something out of office hours and after hours. But the real juice is in being in the panel. If you have experience that you can contribute back to other people, that's going to put you at a different, if it's a different for someone in this panel to ask for help on Discord or an after hours than it is for someone who's never been on the panel or doesn't contribute constantly to that panel. If you're getting started, it's something that you need to figure out for a while, and learn and be on these projects and be an after, and learn and ask questions. But if you have something that you are an expert at or you're advanced at, the panel is the easiest way for you to meet lots of, make lots of friends. After hours is another place to do that. It's kind of a safer version of that. But I would highly recommend it. And I will say that the panel is going to become bigger soon, not larger, but more important. So I would definitely jump in when you can, because it's just the thing to know about how this is architected is a little bit of how I approach things. And I approach things in very long curves. I grew up on a farm, where you plant something that you may not, get anything from for 20 years. So the, and at best it's a couple months, and so for me, everything's about farming. And so, being on the panel is not something you're going to get today. It's something you're going to get in a year when you need help, in one shape or another, or you need a bunch of people to test something, or need a bunch of, you're constantly, being in the panel as someone who already has this experience, who already knows what you're doing, is an opportunity for you to keep on pushing that back in. And remember that when you know something and you write it down, I've talked about this a little bit in the past, but when you know something, you write it down. It's the same. It's right there when you go back to where you wrote it. When you put it into other people, when you take what you know and you push it into other people, it keeps growing. It just keeps going. And then when you come back, there's a whole lot more there than what you had before. And so holding on to it is not going to be as powerful as sharing it. And I've made the mistake of holding on to things like secrets that I'm the only one that knows how to do this, and I got to make payroll. That was usually the thing. And the industry is so big that what we need to do right now is grow that industry out. We need to, do everything we can to push it into the world. And every time we try to turn a secret into cash, we're slowing that process down. There's things I can't talk about from NDA, but I try to share everything else I know, because that's not what makes me successful is being connected to all of you. Is being able to in an instant make a request and have that inside. My boss calls it the media mafia, because I always know a guy. I know someone who can do this thing. And then, like, when I got 25, brios from South Africa from Hosmuk, he's like, who are these people? And it was just an introduction to, like, you always know a person that can do a thing, that can do a thing, that can do a thing. And so that's what you want to build here. That's what I recommend. And then the final thing is just build your own projects, and after you've being on the panel makes it easier to get to know people and to build up where people are going, hey, someone's doing a project, I want to be part of that. But in general, there's people joining projects, but I'd recommend building ones like Tony has, and like Jonas has, and like Leo has, and like Sky has, and all these, and Guy, and there's lots of people that are building projects and then incorporate other people into them and create them in a way that they can fail and that we can figure it out. So anyway, that's how I think about it. It's not the the truth of how it's used. I mean, there's how you built the tool, and then as how everybody uses the tool. I don't know if we have a ton of questions or a ton of comments and questions that are stacked up. Does anyone want to? If no one's raising their hand, we'll just jump to the. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, the only thing you're absolutely right with all of that stuff. Definitely. After Hours has been really great. It's basically my office now because I work from home alone, and I can't help get in there, and I've wisely wasted so many hours in there, and loads of it's great and loads of it's just chatter. But I will say, if anyone out there is thinking of jumping on the panel, then I would definitely encourage doing that, because last summer was the first time I was on here and I was terrified. I'm still terrified when I come on the panel sometimes, but just sort of going for it one time, and then every time after that it can get easier. I mean, I mentioned this to you, Alex, before, but I've been watching MacBreak Weekly for years. And then the first time I jumped on the panel, I jumped into the meeting and it was just me and you. And I was like, oh, I've been watching you for years. Terrified. So if you've come at this from that same angle where, you've been watching Alex or some other people here for years, then it's totally worth just coming in, even hanging out on the mic checks and then leaving or coming back the next day and trying again. It's totally worth trying out. And then every time it gets a bit easier.
Yeah, and After Hours is a great place to kind of test your kit and turn them on and see how it goes, and then continue to kind of go forward with that process. Go ahead, Ken.
The hang of this Monday. Yeah, on the question of kind of like watching after hours or watching office hours, because there is obviously a lot of content, and now we're going to self-promote because of myself and Leo and Rotama here. The last week on office hours that we did, which I think is the first one, I think, we're really nailing it there. That's a really concise, where we did a review of the previous week. So that's a very good way of getting a shortcut feed of what kind of office hours is about. And I highly recommend go to lastweekonofficehours.com and you watch the latest show. That gives you a kind of a very good quick summary of kind of what we're all about.
That's great. Sky.
Every generation has their seminal moments. Where were you when Kennedy was shot? The consequence of COVID has forced us to be isolated. And if I were to get a tattoo, Alex, I'm blaming you or crediting you, I would probably write community is king and content is the honey that draws us. Because I had been a people group of media makers that content was king. And that was because that was how we made a living. But that this experience here, and I love your new phrase of investing in humans, because it grows. That's that seed planting. And it's also that, what other metaphors of throwing a rock into a pond and watching it ripple out. So this is my, and that's, I wish David were on here, because we've been a part of gatherings of people groups for my whole life, as faith traditions that I've been a part of. So that's where this is not a religion, but it is something that I'm going to finish with your other phrase, creating a nutrient rich environment. So that's a gift. And thank you.
Tony.
There's a lot of things that I can say, but I'm going to be very brief in saying that the shaping of this community is a spiritual one. I know we don't talk about religion, but it is a spiritual one. And underneath that is this idea, Alex, that you had, that a global community where no one is left behind. The spirit of that lifts up office hours in a way in which it breaks down the barriers, and it is the way in which this community, the spirit of this community, continues to grow and grow. And people have embraced it in such a way that the conversation is about video production, but it moves in a way where people are connected in ways that people have not begin to have connected in a long time. So I think it's important that you recognize that and not dismiss it as the foundation for why this is doing what it does.
The whole statement, by the way, is global conversation where no one's left out. The whole statement that I cut out the beginning. I've almost never said the beginning in public. The whole statement is a worldwide transformation through a global conversation where no one's left out. So, I mean, it is, and if you wanted to, what we are is a lot of people that are curious and a lot of people that care about other people and a lot of people who are connected. If you wanted to go out to a lot of different places, you would start with the people who do the media, you know, like who can make the stuff, you know, because a lot of you have other interests, making bread or cooking or, you know, cars or whatever those things are. But if we went to people who garden, they won't know how to turn their webcam on. So it has to be someone from here who's interested in gardening, you know, like who can, you know, push that forward, and you have to start there. But fundamentally, it's people willing to connect with each other and people who are curious. I mean, that's what we, you know, and we just happen to be doing media right now. Go ahead, Ari.
Yeah, this was running around in my head, and being an introvert and at the risk of not wanting to sound all woo-woo, I was going to keep it to myself. But the thought that was echoing was that office hours, and I'm speaking for myself, is also a spiritual process. And I'm not going to explain it, but I want to say thank you, Tony, so much for saying what you just said. It rings very true, and you read my mind. So thank you very, very much for that.
And I do want to qualify it. I want to be careful of the spiritual process of that conversation of, you know, they could get a little, you know, like we're not, you know, it's mostly that there is a spirit in the sense that we are connecting to each other powerfully, you know, and that we are, you know, pushing something forward that's powerful. But I want to make sure that we're not, you know, making that more than what it is. But I think that, because I think we all have our own pieces of that, but it is something from a spirit in the sense that we are connecting our spirits together is absolutely correct. Go ahead, Stuart.
Tony mentioned one of the subjects that we don't talk about, and there's a couple others. I just want to point out that banning those subjects is probably what's allowed more people to join in. Yeah. Because we're not talking about the things that are dividing us. We're talking about the same problems that all of us face on technical notes, on building businesses, on learning how to do this, learning how to talk to a camera and sound reasonably professional at it. Mm-hmm. By keeping those simple rules of not talking about the subjects that divide, builds community.
Yeah. Well, and really us, I think that we're experimenting in the sense that we realize how many people, when we don't get caught up in those things, how many people we connect with, and we see the common humanity as opposed to the separate bits and pieces of it, which I still think is the core of that. And I think that, and I learned over time not to allow those things by making that mistake of allowing those things. So that is definitely a learned lesson. Go ahead, Jason.
The only thing I would add to that is that along the lines of the gardener, technology and production in its purest form is, I believe, nobody's primary thing. It is a vehicle of delivery. It is a means to an end. It is a way to convey your passion in a way that that allows people who would otherwise get lost to finally get it. And that, to me, is the most human thing that people can do.
Good, Rotem.
So the one thing that like really gets to me, that this group, and it's here in the panel or in after hours, we are all like respecting each other, and there is no ego. So I think that the spiritual is just leaving the ego aside and respect everybody that like in this group.
Now let's jump into the questions. We've got a stack that's deep.
Okay, our first one comes from John Barker in Malmo, Sweden. He says, how do we avoid over-optimizing office hours? Where is the line between getting through as many questions as possible versus allowing room for discussion?
I think we touched on that a little bit, but I think that again, one of the things that I've done is by being able to push the questions back, it means I don't feel like I have to rush at the very end to just try to buzz through a lot of questions. We just go, oh, we didn't get to them today. And so that's allowed us to talk through, to your point, to not over optimize, I was trying to get to every question, no question left behind. And by taking that out, it allows us to continue to have reasonable discussions on every question all the way till the end. At the same time, we want to learn, we want to continue as panelists to train ourselves to be more succinct, and to be able to say, say that, knowing that without after hours, we couldn't do that in office hours. We can say something that's succinct that largely answers that question, knowing that there's 21 hours that we can gnaw on that if we didn't get the question answered perfectly, because the reality is that no answer that we're talking about can be answered in less than 10 or 15 minutes effectively. So we could do 4 questions, and so we, but hopefully we're able to provide, and I think most of the time we're pretty good at a fairly accurate, answer. And you'll see me let a lot of people answer the question if I don't feel like we nailed it, and then if that doesn't happen, I just try to close it up at the end. Like, here's a couple little details that I want to put in, then we move on to the next thing. So, but I do think I'm concerned about that all the time, of doing that. I'm hoping that the organization that we put in the back end makes it actually easier in some ways to do that. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says, what are some tips for making questions fit the Mukana character limit?
Go ahead, Stuart.
Oh, given how many questions Douglas answers and poses for us, I can understand why he would want to be efficient about it. I'll give you one that's a writer's trick, which is to think about if you were saying the question directly to somebody standing in front of you, or if you were trying to pitch it as a character in a film doing the same. Try to be efficient with the words, try to be natural with your language. Don't go too flowery. The simpler the terms that bring us focused down on what the question is, the better an answer.
And one of the things is just hard for us. Part of the reason we limit that is so that people are they ask questions that we can answer effectively during the show. So by kind of forcing it to go down to a smaller nub, it means that this is the question that we can. That's, if we make it longer, it's hard for us to track and hard for us to answer. Within the time constraints that we have. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael back again says, should we take measures to prevent being clogged with one category of questions, audio or music, for example, on days when we have panelists that specialize in that area?
Go ahead, Leo.
I think one of the things that I find with office hours, and I think it's really important, is that sometimes things go in the opposite directions than you were planning. And if you plan too hard, you actually will sometimes restrict where you actually end up going. Right. So it's that sort of thing, is if I put a nuclear physicist in a room with a biologist in a room with somebody else, would that actually will that enable us to do something that we don't actually have? And I think that's really a key point of it.
Yeah, and one of the things that my goal is to grow us to a point where at least Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Saturday are very much all questions around. Like Tuesday, I'm really trying to make the audio one where audio experts know to show up on the panel, where all the questions are audio if we can. And then Wednesday is video, some version of video. And I haven't been super successful at that, but we've been kind of working through that, except for AWS. And the reason it's not on Friday, which is where AWS would normally fit, is because there's folks at AWS that can't come, can't watch if we do it on Friday. So anyway, and then Friday, I've kind of listed out. Friday is more technical, and Monday's kind of a wild card, and that's kind of how I have it set up. But the idea, though, is and then Thursday is kind of a talent day. We want to talk about working with talent. We want to have talent on. My goal eventually is to have talent on every Thursday. So an actor, a musician, someone like that that's on every Thursday. We haven't gotten to that yet, but the idea, though, is that draws a different group of people, both in the panel, the questions, I want to make sure that, you can ask an audio question anytime, but if you come on Tuesday, you're going to get a great answer. We're going to have, the audio experts all there, to answer your question. And so we do want to give you that once a week kind of, I know that I can get my question answered there. So I actually wanted to get clogged up with audio questions. So, and so anyway, that's the design anyway. Next question.
A. Mitchell's in Washington, of course, says, how can someone ask the shortest question and still be understood? The current record holder, by the way, he says, is just 4 characters. How do we best that?
Jason.
We certainly don't try to best 4 characters. I'm going to start with that. Eliminate adverbs, eliminate qualifiers, and eliminate any context that is not directly relevant. And understand that tomorrow is another day. If you don't like the answer, no one's going to hold it against you. If you decide about the question, think it over, rephrase it, tweak it down a little bit, and then ask it again.
Yeah. And it is important as we keep on going down this path, is to ask better questions, and for the producers to vote those questions up and down based on their structure, not just, like, I'm not interested in that, or I am interested in that, because we're going to get more and more questions coming in to a point where we not only can we not answer all the questions, we can't even get close. And so you want to get into the habit of the voting process to kind of organize them for us. Next question.
Sky Gleason in Seattle, and here on the panel, what percentages do we in office hours, after hours, self-identify as part of media brain test, a knowledge base, a global social community, AV support platform, educational support system? What are we?
Nigel?
Yeah, so I don't know I can answer this question, but I can tell you my experience is to come and listen, to learn and contribute. I try and do them in that sequence. I'm clearly the least technical person probably on this panel, but each one of us, I think, has something to contribute. And I think that's what makes the community work. But I always tell people I work with, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, use them in that proportion. And for most of us, it's probably 5 ears and 1 mouth.
Go ahead, Stuart.
We are a support group for polymaths. If you don't know what a polymath is, it's worth looking up.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. Yeah. I have a hard time describing it. I just, I try to describe it. I describe it different ways depending on who I'm talking to, because it's just impossible to kind of encompass. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael in next with, if we integrated real-time translation in Mukana to and from the panelists and the audience member languages, would that bog down office hours too much for the user?
It wouldn't. We just haven't implemented it yet. It wouldn't. I mean, if you said my thing is English, and then, but I would say that the problem really will be is that by using English, we all type it in the way we type it and leave it to AI. And your English version of someone asking a question in Russian will be different. So I think that's going to be the challenge with that. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael again says, if we producetized the Office Hours 2.0 infrastructure, productized, I guess, the infrastructure, could we market it for corporate and educational clients to build their own events on premises?
My goal is to figure it out, and we'll all keep talking about how we're figuring it out, and provide it to folks within office hours to use it for a variety of different things, with the little node that we have, and then see where it goes. Like I'm not trying to productize it. I'm trying to get it working and then make sure you all know how it works. And if people want to use our hardware to do that, or, there's other folks that are figuring out how to do it in the cloud in a slightly different way, that's great. And so the idea is that we're thinking through this concept. I'm more interested in the disruption of the process than I am in the marketing of a product, is that I want as many people doing it as possible, because, I think we have the opportunity to move the world forward, and into a more conversational world and less of a transactional relationship, which is what media and advertising is. Next question.
A. Mitchell's in Washington says, as seen in the Worldwide Developer Conference from Apple events, the content delivery for Office Hours 2.0 isn't really mobile device friendly or even compatible for most due to single screen, single audio limitations of these devices. How can this group not be left out of these style events?
Go ahead, Leo.
I think this is always really tough. However, what I would say is that I listen quite often to office hours using a mobile phone, and I don't see the screen. I think the content in office hours, not always, but the content in office hours will lend itself to being audio only. And in that respect, I think there is other content that I see that is less audio friendly that I would have bigger problems with than I do with office hours.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, as part of, I think the only one in this room other than Alex who was actually on the WWDC panel, I think I can safely say that Office Hours 2.0 is so different than what we were doing then that it's kind of hard to compare.
Yeah, I think that we are thinking a lot about the mobile and the fact that, for instance, looking at the panel for a long period of time in the mobile doesn't work, and having a panel open, you really do want to cut to singles more often. We learned a lot, and the WWC experiment basically is driving 2.0, of the things that we learned, and we'll keep on learning. It'll be good, and then it'll be like, oh, we could do better, in some other way. And so we'll keep on working on that. One of the things that the mobile version or the light version of Mukana is really designed as a second screen experience, so that you can watch it on an Apple TV or on your iPad or a computer and have it full screen and be able to still interact and ask questions. And so we don't always use it that way, but that is the design. And when we eventually have an app that does that, those things will tie together very tightly. And so that experience can be on both systems, and how you interact is in that process. So next question.
David Paskin's up next, Miami, Florida. And David's asking, wondering how we can make the Office Hours panel more diverse and inclusive.
Go ahead, Sky.
I think it is. Now, in the attitude, at least. Now, the statistics prove otherwise, but I guess I'm in being a part of a lot of social groups for doing good things. I'm wondering what is the need and how do we address that? And a salesperson's comment is, what is the problem you're trying to solve? So I think as a collective, we would be more diverse if we were not looking at ourselves, but looking at outside. How can we help the need? And education is why I started in this process. I'd love to see us explode inside that universe.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
It's always great to have more and more. And we've, Alex has said, and we have all said that we welcome that and hope more people come in. I think there's a certain self-limitation, because unless you're either self-funded or self-employed or something like that, it's hard for a lot of people in time zones to take time off of work or time from their restrictions and donate 2 straight hours every day or most days. I would hope that there are plenty more people who are able to do that and can come and join us. But I think it's a natural a natural result of that. Certainly no plan on anybody's part. We would love to have more diverse voices all the time.
Yeah, go ahead, Tony.
Continue to be intentional in what we're doing, and also understand that there are people who are watching, and they're just waiting until they are comfortable enough to participate.
Yeah, and to your point, I can tell you statistically that we're much more diverse than the panel. Office Hours itself, and even After Hours, is far more diverse than the panel. So the panel is just the people who showed up to talk about this stuff. And we also see that the diversity changes based on the subject matter. So, for instance, the education oftentimes is nearly half women. So it's it just depends on what we're talking about as well. Yeah, go ahead, Stuart.
One simple thing that people can do if they're watching and they're not part of the old white men group that we are, invite others that to come and join in. Simple. Invite them, let them join. Sure, they'll take their time, they'll join Office Hours, and yes, we set the bar very high for our presentation. Now, I'm probably the cheapest one here on secondhand camera, on a 30-year-old lens, on a microphone from a secondhand store. It is possible to achieve a decent quality output.
Of course, you're frozen right now.
It's perfect timing.
Yeah, probably. The odd thing is it was the Mac that has been eating my bandwidth.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, Nigel.
Yeah, 3 things. One, like Stuart said, invite people. Second of all, as we get to promote us more, we need to find places where the diverse community goes and promote ourselves in that. Yeah. And third, I would tell you, I think when we enforce the rules of the road or the rules of the community, we should be more sensitive about how we do that. Sometimes we're a bit too pointed, and I think that has scared people off.
Yeah. And especially in After Hours, we want to hold ourselves to a higher standard as far as, again, we have a clean show it wanders every once in a while. Someone might get a text from me going, "Hey, clean show," like, you know. So I don't necessarily jump up and say it in front of everyone, but I do oftentimes reach out. So clean show, being careful of being. In general, I think that we have to constantly check ourselves, because I think a lot of times we're unconscious to it, of being culturally insensitive. So, you know, there's just a lot of things that we might say that are okay because we just didn't know better, but we have to know better. You know, like, you know, so both here as well as in after hours, we just have to constantly, when we say something, just think about, you know, especially, it's not that we shouldn't be funny, but when you're funny, you are insensitive 80% of the time. So just remember that. Like, just you are stepping on someone when you're funny about 80% of the time. So just be very careful. It doesn't mean you can't be funny. It's just that you want to think about what's about to come out of your mouth and how people are going to handle it. Next question.
Tim Holm in San Lorenzo, California, up next with, is there a way to increase the font size on the screen for the Mukana panelist view? You may be able to do that inside the settings. No, you can't do it right now. We'll do that, but you can hit Command Plus. Command Plus will do it. It'll make everything bigger. So that's one way to do it. But we'll work on getting that sorted out a little bit more effectively. It's in your other settings for the main view, but not there. So yeah. Next question. Sky Gleason in Seattle, Washington. Today, 2021-09-23 is day 548 on Mukana. What will day 3000 look like?
Go ahead, Leo.
We'll all be underwater, I assume, by then.
I just want you to know that if both caps and melt, the water, I have a beachfront property. It'll literally come right up to my lower yard, and I'll just throw some sand out there. We won't all be underwater.
So I actually went today. I visited two places that I actually did the installations of their equipment a year ago for stuff, and and it's amazing to see how far they've gone forward in 1 year, and the acceptance and adoption of various different technologies is amazing. And you're sitting there going, and we're talking about this, and we've talked about it before, about the quality of the panel. We've talked about various different things and where this is driving. What I can say is that every day in office hours, I think I see better and better things coming out. I see different ways of doing things. I think the after hours discussions about certain things are just like, do you know, I never even thought we could do that, or this is there. There's things that John Barker produces, which I'm very glad I'm a founding payment member of all of the stuff that he's doing, is brilliant. You know, we're just seeing this. So to answer Sky's question, I don't know where we're going to be in that number 3000, except for we will be somewhere where we won't recognize where we are now.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Sky, interesting question. There's tangential thought that I did a spreadsheet and shared it with Alex. September 1st of next year, we'll have passed Twit in total episodes. Thought that was interesting.
Yeah, go ahead, Ari, before I jump in. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't know where we will be. I know it will be somewhere good, but I would say that I hope that there will be many clones of office hour like discussion, like communities that will spread the community through technology and things like that. So I hope that will be one of the effects.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, the vision that I have for it anyway is that, number one is to Ari's point, that we could keep on expanding. I mean, other people can do it as well. But we could keep on adding things that were around other passions that different people here have that apply media to. We just apply media to, whether it's travel or whether it's, cars or gardening or whatever and those things keep on going out, but they're still somehow tangentially connected to what we're doing. I think that we'll have, if we're successful, we'll end up having little studios that we use that are owned by us, that we're able to be part of, and a larger production community that can trade work back and forth, so that basically, in some hiring, some process that we can find each other more efficiently than what we have right now. I think that those could even grow into physical communities where, there's groups of us that are, working around a studio and living there, like as fellows, kind of thing that are kind of running that. So imagine having like a Belfast kind of thing where you have people at a studio and you have, maybe 30 people online running the event, but there's 20 people that are in the studio that are all like doing the cameras or doing whatever. And so the thing is this, we are figuring out this kind of interconnected process. But, a lot of this was all the seed of all of this was when I was 18, 19 years old, mowing 5 acres of mowing every week, and thinking about how I wanted to be able to live on an island by myself, largely by myself, but with a small family or whatever, but live on an island and be able to basically have a tap of work that I could open up and do enough work to pay what I'm doing and then close it back up again and go back to what I was doing. And so, the idea is to build it to a point where it's fluid enough for all of us that we can live anywhere and be able to work with each other seamlessly, and I think that that's what we're trying to get to, or at least what I'm trying to get to. Noah?
Yeah, that sounds really interesting to have an in-person kind of garage of people. But the other thought too is of like having maybe some sort of like company-based or profit share kind of system where you have one big entity that markets it and you basically have franchises underneath.
Yeah. I mean, Office Hours itself will be a nonprofit, but I think that we could theoretically, help another company do that kind of thing, and it could be multiple companies. It's not so much a franchise thing as much as it is just we can hire each other, effectively. The big thing is us being able to know who is ready to do what. Next question.
Todd Rains of Allen, Texas says, can someone give a high-level tutorial on Discord, or is it just chat or audio or what?
Go ahead, Jason.
Actually, we don't use it as audio chat at all, so I'm going to go with that third or what. There are amazing tutorials on YouTube. My advice is use, the stuff on Discord's official page as reference and then just hop in.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, it came out of gaming, and gaming, the people who played together wanted a way to chat and communicate. So that's kind of where it started. It turned out to be massive because there's massive numbers of people who were involved in those kind of team gaming experiences. And now it's expanded so far out beyond that it's just massive, and it's adding all these new capabilities. But it's an inter-person group chat group.
And we don't do that yet. So it's we probably won't expand the feature set of Discord because there's other things that could be done. so it's I don't want to dig any deeper into it. Next question.
Stephen Fisher of Würzburg, Germany is up next with what would be an easy way to search for all the answered questions.
Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, I know we're not there yet. The website does have a search function. It's pretty powerful, but it's not, the answers to the questions haven't been tagged or highlighted. When we have a new engine, I think you'll see that better.
Yeah, there's a few things that's why the voting on the quality of the answers is so important. So when you see the question pop up in the chat, to go ahead and vote on, like, I really like that answer, or I didn't like that answer, because that's going to help us in the future. But there'll be a time eventually where you can search not every question from now back, but every question from now forward. When we turn it on, you'll be able to answer, search all the questions and get to the video that you write a part of the video that had that answer. It's on the roadmap. We just don't have it implemented yet. Next question.
Former panelist Jan Landy of Phuket, Thailand now says, I hear you mentioned Office Hours version 2. What will be the main differences from what we're currently used to?
Given the time frame right now to talk about it, I would recommend going back to last Friday and watching Office Hours 2.0, because it'll give you a really good sense of where we're going from a broadcast perspective, but it makes it into a broadcast show. Next question.
Roland Kurtzer of Vienna, Austria. Why is that maze where the viewers are redirected from YouTube to Zoom to Mukana to Discord with hidden links between those targets? Why is it there?
It's a filter. Like, just, it's a filter. It is designed to make it harder. Like it is architected that way, is that you have to climb the mountain, and then you have to swing across the tree, and then you have to, go through the ravine and go down the thing. And that's how we created it. It's not nearly as hard as climbing the mountain and going up the tree, but it is a little bit of a process, and it separates the serious from the unserious. And that is, we want to do that right now. Like, there'll be a time when it's a lot easier and things are easier, and we'll look, and some of you will complain that, I remember when it was like, it was hard to get into, and I was part of the original folks that had to go through this and this and this, and now it just happens, but but it really cleans up the conversation. I mean, that's why it, it's pushing it through all those filters, just gets rid of a lot of folks that would be problematic. It gets rid of some good folks too, but it's done very, very consciously. Next question.
Roland Kreutzer is right back from Vienna with, speaking about after hours, where to find that stream. Is it a secret group or just an urban legend?
Go ahead, Ken.
It's not secret. It's been on the website, well, almost since the website was built. On the scheduling page, you just have to look for it. It's there. It's not hidden.
It's just not obvious. So and again, all part of the game. So it's of just having people have to dig in a little bit before we hand it to them, and it's very opposite to what many other people do. And they just want as many people as possible. I want good people that are going to be part of what we're doing, that are willing to work a little bit at it, at least to build the core. And then again, we're going to give more people a wider breadth of being able to do it. But we want to, as we build this core, we would have not survived if we had just tried to expand it to as many people as possible. That's not important. It's the quality over quantity. Next question.
John Barker in Malmö, Sweden is back with, when we schedule a second hour guest, how can we all make use of their time and knowledge wisely?
Go ahead, Josh.
So one thing that we might be able to do is when some of them do have more time and they can stay for the after hours, maybe we could give them our attention there, maybe set aside some time and encourage them to kind of bring them to the forefront.
Yeah, a couple things. One is that we're starting to put out links, and we're going to get better at it as we bring people in. But study ahead of time, write down questions that you have. Pretend that you're the interviewer. If you were on a radio show, what are the questions that you would ask them, and try to figure it out. Just really try to think through those questions as producers. Think about how you're going to vote those questions up and down to make sure that we're getting the most out of that opportunity to be with them. Stay away from gotchas. We're not a gotcha company, a group, we're not part of trying to corner them. Cornering people impacts all of the people who come second hour forever. If you want to corner them, you can corner them some other way in an email, but don't be the person trying to ask the hard question. We do want to ask questions that dig into how does this work and what does it look like? But if we put them on a griddle, we just will get less people to come jump on the griddle, and so we just want to be careful of that process. But I think that, really studying them and going into their web pages and thinking about what that might be. I could even see a point where we discuss it in after hours the day before, hey, we got this person coming up and what do we have, and think about it and everything else eventually, to kind of, really make sure that we get the most out of it. Because we're about to start getting some pretty high level guests that we probably want to take full advantage of having them there. Next question.
Peter Moore in Auckland, New Zealand's in with, given Alex's answer to the question stating that he wants Thursdays to have some talent on office hours, I think we as a group should have a starter kit for said talents, media people and or channels, so that they can publicize that they will be on office hours. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, yes, I completely agree. We need a couple things. One is we need to be able to send something out to any person coming the second hour. I just need to send out a PDF that I haven't built yet, or we haven't built yet, that says this is what you can expect, and we're going to have this, and we're going to this, and you have to have this set up. And we do that for our other stuff, but I have to conform it to what we're doing. I just haven't done it yet. And then the other thing that we need to do is here's how you promote it, and this is where you can promote it, and these are the links to use, and these are the things, that type of thing. Is you're absolutely correct that we need to do that. Eventually, for talent, I'm trying to kind of devise here's a kit that we'll send you. Eventually we as a group will hopefully purchase a kit or a couple kits that can float around, and that we send you a little box that you can put up in your house that you will look nice and sound nice and everything else. And if you're doing a concert, or playing something for us, we get multi-channel back. We put it into immersive. We have a 10-bit connection to your house, that type of thing. So that's what's in the future, not very distant future. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, and of course, anyone who's good at Photoshop, it might be a good idea to just create a lookbook, essentially, that, send us a headshot and we'll give you a 16:9 with an office hours this and, an appearing on at type deal. But yeah, just some sort of quick, easy way that, they don't even have to worry about overlaying it.
Next question.
Noah Sargent in Fullerton, California says, we may want to have a time per question that starts at 3:30 and then shortens toward the top of the hour. Is that possible and a good idea?
Go ahead, Jason.
There are a lot of mathematical ways that I can think to do this. And at this point, I think this is the benefit of having a good and practiced host. I would assume that in the future, you know, the other part of being a good host is knowing that you don't always know a good answer. Right. And to that end, you know, the reputation of how well you answer the question will affect and inform the way it works.
Yeah, and it's an unfinished feature, so it's supposed to be more adjustable than it is right now. Chris is just busy on other things. Next question.
Peter Moore in Auckland, New Zealand is back with, whilst I'm not working at the moment, I'm considering changing my name to Ever the Optimist. Jokes aside, will there be a facility to donate to the Office Hours nonprofit once I get employed in the not too distant future?
Yes, you know, that's part of, we've had offers in the past to help with that. And the problem is if you give me money, then half of it goes to the government. so I mean, I know that some of you want to give more to the government, but I'd prefer to keep it all for us to do good things and move the world forward. So by creating a 501c3, it gives it a bucket that is more protected and we can put it towards things all the time. And I also don't want people to feel like they were giving money to me. I'm not asking for that. So I wanted to go to what we were doing all 100%. And so anyway, there will be places for people to do that when we move forward. I just want to keep people from being afraid. We're not going to take away what we already have, you know, based on that. But there'll be other opportunities to give to the program so that we can make it better and bigger and everything else. And so I just needed to make sure that there was a bucket or a structure that would allow that to be managed and effective and you know, accountable. You know, so we're almost done. All the paperwork's done. We're just waiting for the final certifications. Next question.
Stephen Montagna in Madison, Wisconsin's up next. Can we set a guideline to use the reply function in Makana? Comments nestled under the original topic make tracking the conversations much easier.
Yes, please do that. We'll probably have more threading as we move forward. There's a lot of places that could go. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael has our last one. What issues would you see with Office Hours 2.0 on a mobile device? I've listened to Office Hours and talked on Office Hours in the car via Apple CarPlay all the time.
Yeah, go ahead, Rotem.
So the one problem I see is if you don't get YouTube Premium, you cannot close your phone and put an earpiece and listen to the show. Because if it's going to be like mainly on YouTube, you cannot do it. Now with Zoom, I can close my phone, I can put it aside, I'm with my earpiece and I can listen all the time.
And you can, it's not perfect and we're still working on it, but right now we stream it to Makana. So if you're in Makana, you can actually, in the mobile version, there's a little button that you can turn on and just listen to the show. In a web page, it's not, you know, it's not a killer experience. We're working on that. And when we have an app that does that, it'll be a lot better because it'll be designed, you know, for that. But we do have that stream right now. And that's something that we're going to keep on getting better at, is making sure that it's a listenable experience. And then as we move that listenable experience, one of the things we're going to look at is how do we make it available as a radio type thing. So you could literally distribute it to radio stations anywhere in the world. There's, you know, in the United States, it's a little competitive, but there's still talk radio stations that might be interested. And the interesting thing is that people could be listening to it and on Makana, they could be listening to the radio station. Less interesting here, more interesting in places like Africa and other places where they really rely still on radio for information. So what if they could listen to us talking about these things but still like text message their questions. You know, I don't understand this, and I don't understand that, and have it kind of addressed. That may sound crazy, but I one of the things I've never forgotten was I was, you know, on Tech TV all the time, you know, once a week, showing Photoshop tips, and I got this one email from a village in Pakistan that said, you know, we just want you to know we've missed you because you were gone I was gone for like 2 weeks or something like that. I said you have to understand that there's one television in the village, and everyone in the village crowds around the television to watch to watch your magic in Photoshop. You know, like they just think it's so cool. Then they become this huge thing. So when you're not on, it's a big deal. You know, and so anyway, so the thing is that there are people who just want to listen to it, and they may aspire to that. They may not have that technology, and we want to make sure that they can be listening to that all the time. And so, you know, we're going to find ways to distribute it wider. You know, as the first step has been just to clean it up, you know, get it all working. But it's why we do our mic checks and why we tighten our video and everything else, is so that we could find other avenues of participation for folks down the road. Anyway, I think that was kind of fun. I wasn't sure if people were going to be interested in that or not. I was like, I probably ought to sort that out a little bit. So thank you so much for the great questions to our producers who kept the conversation going there. And thank you to the panel. Great comments, great questions. It's great to see. It was a nice big panel today, so it was good to see all of you here. And thanks for coming in and contributing. And now we're going to jump into after hours, and we'll see you tomorrow talking about producing. All right, see you then.